But the difference between a boom and a neck mic is that neck mics work off of vibrations, whereas a boom is air moving, the way you hear it. So there's a qualitative difference, and as Mary said, you'll always take a boom over a neck mic. If you go into a mix and you've recorded me with a neck mic and a boom in a good position, you'll always pick the boom. A director will say, I want the best sounding one, and they'll go, oh yeah, take that one, that's a boom? Oh yeah, okay, surprised. But I'm really pushing for booms, and I know there's a great want to use tie mics, neck mics, personal mics, radio mics, call them what you will. But I think there's a qualitative difference, and it also changes your relationship with the subject, which I think as an editor I notice that there's something about when you're holding a boom, you're part of the scene. And when you put a neck mic on somebody, I feel like there's a distance. Maybe you don't feel that.
No, I think that is true. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, but quite often when you're holding a boom, you might be closer to the subject than the camera is a lot of the time, and you do get a rapport with people. You also get that when you're putting radio mics on them. Actually,
a different kind of
rapport, and that is something. Some people don't like having radio mics put on, either for the reasons that you've said, or just because you physically have to be in their space to do it, and not everybody enjoys that.
And there's the male-female thing at times too. That
I've had a lot of conversations with male sound recordists about that as well. That maybe I don't have. Maybe I'm not as intimidating as some big bloke putting a mic on, a lady perhaps. I don't know. Maybe I'm, maybe I'm shielded from some of that.
But anyway,
there was a question there.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that earlier, actually. But do you have any techniques you use to put people at ease when you're invading their personal space?
I just go and chat. I just go and chat, and we make a bit of a joke about it.
Because I've did a little bit at work, like miking people up for presentations and stuff, and there's always this sort of like weird, awkward thing where they're like stood there, kind of like I'm not being indignified and looking away or talking to somebody else while you're performing a service for them, like you're shining their shoes.
Yes, yeah. I kind of try and sort of catch their eye and be friendly beforehand, and sometimes if you can see someone's really awkward, I mean sometimes I just say, look, I know this feels really awkward, I just need to put this wire down your shirt, and I won't be a minute, it'll be fine. Do I need your wife's permission? Is it okay? Can you have to gauge what sort of person it is and whether they're going to respond well to a joke or not, and sometimes people say weird stuff to you. That's quite funny.
You never get a shaky hand. That's my problem. I shake. I just panic. I'm like,
but then you make a joke out of that. You just have to go with them. I get really nervous around people. It's my first day. Sometimes people believe you when you say that. Never done it before, so I think this will be all right. And sometimes people, when you approach them, they're so different. Some people are exactly as you've described, and other people are like, right, where do you want to put it? Really. I don't know. You just have to gauge what the person's going to be like, what they're going to be happy with.
I know you could talk mic placement like forever, really, but we've got some 4060s, some
DPAs,
and we bought them because Chris Watson recommended them for ambient recording because they're very good for that, and we got them through the video team budget because they wanted some lapel mics, and we were like, opportunity. So we got these, used them the first time on someone's collar, and we got this weird, he sounded like R2-D2, like some sort of like Darth Vader or something, like it was kind of, the sound was coming through his neck, and it came out all really weird.
Right.
And we've not really used them since.
They'd probably be all right if they're not quite so high up. And the thing is with mistakes like that, for want of a better word, is if you've got someone monitoring it who is a sound recordist when it's happening, hopefully they will make a decision to move it, because you can just get weird acoustic things like that.
I was monitoring it, but like he was doing a presentation to
And thought, I can't
100
move it now.
people, and I couldn't stop.
Yeah, I try and get things on people, you know, as soon as possible, so that you've got a bit of a chance to listen first to see if there's a problem, even if it's like as they're just chatting to other people, like, you know, I was chatting to everyone just now, you know, have a little sneaky listen and go, all right, you know, I think that'll be all right. Or are they, because some people do weird stuff where they have hand movements that slap the mic all the time or fiddle with the cable or whatever, so that you can go and try and do something about that or warn them not to do it. Or I mean up on a collar is kind of, that's quite a high place to have a mic, really. It's where you can get problems either like that, or just because someone's neck is rubbing on it or someone's chin is rubbing on a mic. So I would try and avoid that anyway, and try and get it a little bit further down if you can. Obviously, depending on what people are wearing, it's not always possible. Oh, there's so many questions.
Do you ever use radio polls?
I haven't, but because the other thing about radio mics is that, or you know, anything on a radio link, is that's one more thing to go wrong, that you can get interference on, or someone's mobile phone can interfere with it, or the batteries run out, or whatever. So it's a bit like the kind of the placement thing. It's like less is more. So that's my kind of edict on it anyway. But obviously that's really useful in situations where you can't have a cable. The mic that I used for recording the piano in that last clip, that was on a radio link, and that was one of the reasons why I didn't do it in stereo, that I only had the kit to have one mic of that type plugged into a radio transmitter. So that was very useful. There was a lady behind you.
Yeah, sorry, this might be a bit of a vague and general question. It's to both of you, really. I wondered if you felt like talking about the relationship between artistic ideas and technology, because I think, me personally, I've sometimes felt a bit bogged down in trying to learn about more and better technology, to the detriment of actually doing the work, or thinking about why it is of need or want this new technology. So I've kind of become a bit of a non-technical person, but on the other hand, I sometimes think, well, you know, I do need more technology or better technology, but I don't know, I just would like to hear your thoughts
Do you want
on
to give a thought?
what is the kind of balance that you think is needed between developing your ideas and then picking the technology that might help them, or stay with the technology you've got if you're comfortable and confident with that? See?
I mean, I think that's exactly right. You know, you fit the technology that's right for you and for the kind of film you're making. And if you have a very complicated setup, like I was listening to the man who was recording the sound for Ray Beckett, who did the sound for Hurt Locker and for the new Catherine Bigelow film. Yeah. And he started in documentary. And in some ways, he says, you know, I would use one mic if I could, but I'm being asked to do setups that involve transmitters, radio microphones, boosters, and all kinds of different things. Another friend of mine did some recording during the Olympics, and he said, you know, when you're trying to record sound from various locations at the same time during a road race or whatever, it involves technology. But if you're not doing that kind of a thing, if you're recording one person talking to camera, then keep it as simple as you possibly can. I mean, I'm sort of the same way. I'm a real purist is a nice way of putting it. But I try to keep things as simple as possible because I know the workflow from recording to the editing room to the mix. And I know that very often low-budget films can get very bogged down because the recording was done in too complicated a way, like on a sound devices, what are they, 12 tracks?
Yes.
And you're thinking, why did you need this when you have a very simple film? And it's because they could do it. And then in the editing room, you have to work all of that out and then in the sound edit you have to work it out again, and it adds money to your budget, time or money, or both. So I think you really have to choose the technology carefully. And I think going back to what you said about the more things you have, the more things can go wrong. And that's very true of radio microphones. It's not as bad as it used to be, but you get into a situation and you've got a radio microphone and you're picking up odd sounds from somewhere, and that's the only mic you've got, and you can't use it. So I think you know, pick what's right for you. I don't know if Nick Broomfield is still recording the same way he always did, but you know, one microphone, it's gotten him a long way.
Yeah, the wrong, I've heard it quoted a few times, the wrong microphone in the right place is going to give you better sound than the right microphone in the wrong place. No, that clip I showed right at the beginning of the Weatherman, where it's a transmitter drops off the end of his microphone and he goes silent. Apparently, I couldn't find the next bit of the clip, but apparently after the little insert, he reappears with a Sennheiser 416 in his hand, held upside down, and you still can't hear him. And I would have loved to have shown you that as well, but that's a really good example. Yeah, right microphone, wrong place. You know, rubbish. So, I mean, I love gadgets, I love technology, I'm that sort of person, but I would still say keep it simple.
Just a quick anecdote. I was doing sound recording, and I worked for one producer a lot on documentaries and some fiction. And I really was, you know, the one person with a boom. And I had to record a piano at one point in a recording studio for him. And for the first time, I had an assistant who had been trained at ITV. And she said, I said, well, how do you record a piano at ITV? She said, well, we put one mic in there, and one underneath, and one over there. And she had about a 4 or 5 mic setup. And I just went spare, because I didn't know, well, should we do it this way? She does it that way at ITV. I'd use one microphone. And I sort of froze, because I wasn't that comfortable with that kind of technology. I mean, that's pretty rudimentary now. But the producer said to me, you know, if I gave you one microphone and you had to record in a toilet, you'd give me a good recording. I give you an assistant and 5 microphones and you don't know what to do. So you have to be aware of that. So, you know, stick to your own talents, your own level of expertise.
That was sort of the conundrum I had with that film about the pianist. Because
Right.
it was about the piano playing, but actually the piano playing was incidental to what they were saying to each other, or the way that they were. It's about the way those two characters interact with each other. I mean, you can tell he's a brilliant pianist from, like, you know, if I'd have recorded it in a toilet with one microphone, you'd have known he was a brilliant pianist. The story was about the relationship, where he sat there and looked admiringly at him while he spoke. I think you're next.
Just about that film, it was amazing. I've not don't know, but is it available?
I think you might be able to watch it on the Curzon website. I think it might be one of theirs. When you do watch it, I wasn't the only sound recordist on it, and the bit that sounds really awful at the beginning, I think it was self-shot. I don't think it was any sound recordings, but it wasn't me. Okay, the bits that sound good.
Yeah.
You said you're really into technology. I need a tip. I'd like to record sound as good as possible, bearing in mind that it's going to be very difficult for me to have microphones that look too professional, basically. So I was wondering, have you ever tested the iPhone as a sound recorder? Or maybe someone in this room. Has anyone tested the iPhone as a recorder?
I've used it for community radio.
And which microphone would you link up to it?
What do you want to do with it?
Record maybe either interviews or music, which is not ideal, but as I said, it's just something that can't look too professional. I don't want to attract attention.
Oh, I see what you mean. There is, which I have used, or I have edited stuff that has been recorded this way for radio. There's a little clip-on mic called a Blue Mikey, Blue Mikey. You can get them for about 20 quid now, although the retail was around 100, I think. It clips onto your iPhone, and it's stereo, and it's quite good. I mean, it might be that would do what you're asking. I think there might be various other things like that now, but it's just a little box that clips onto your phone.
There's a Belkin one as well, which is the same. It's like a little XY mic on the front. But I used to use it on my iPod, which back in the old days when they had a little hard drive. I don't know if the iPhone's a solid state now.
I've got an MP3 player that can record.
But you get like a little whirring from the hard drive sometimes. So
Oh really? Yeah.
yeah, you have to do some tests. But
Okay.
like that's a good alternative as well. Or Zoom.
Oh, yeah,
That's a Zoom
yeah,
H2.
Yeah.
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 I mean, you stick a sock on top of it, it looks rubbish.
Good idea. Thanks.
Yeah, look around and see what's available. And I'm not an expert on those things, but yeah, I've seen them. Have you seen anything useful like that?
No, the Zoom is pretty good. As you
Yeah.
say, you can just put anything on it and it's fine.
It works alright, doesn't it?
What model is it?
It's just the H2, the old one.
Zoom H2.
They make an H2N now, which has got a lot more functionality.
It's very I actually have
No,
that
no,
one.
it's
It's
just the old
quite big
one.
and bulky.
I did hear a recording once on I don't know if it was an iPhone, but it was a phone. It was being done on a short fiction film. It was in a club where they couldn't take a crew. And it sounded good. But it was quite full sound. I don't know how that, a voice, it depends how you want to use it later.
Yeah.
Does the quality matter?
Yeah. Well, it's basically one of these situations where the better the quality, the better. It's basically getting the best possible quality without attracting attention.
Yeah.
You could also, sorry,
No, go ahead.
you could also get like two little microphones. Jez Riley told he was saying that you can stick a lapel mic like here on both shoulders
Yeah.
and just like stand there, and you can get really good recordings like that.
A living microphone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
brilliant.
something that we should mention really, because I've done that kind of with if you're trying to do something a bit covert like that and you can't get the microphone where you want, you can put the microphone on somebody and ask them to go and stand close to whatever's happening.
Can I ask why you needed to look?
I'll tell you afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering that as well and thought,
But
maybe I shouldn't
It
ask.
is ethical.
Right.
Yeah, we just taught you how to do
Yeah,
something
it's
really, really unethical.
Yeah. No, it is ethical.
No, the only reason I ask is I know sometimes people will say, I don't want the people that we're filming to care about the equipment. Can you play it down?
Oh yeah, no.
And that's it's often good if they do see the equipment and they,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like they can talk to you about it and it makes them comfortable in some way. They're not intimidated.
Yeah.
Also, you can plant microphones in places where you know
Mm.
people are going to be. That was what I didn't actually show you a scene in the court, but that's what I did on. There was a microphone on the witness box, and because people were going to go there, then you know that they're going to be picked up. So, like if it's a place that you're filming in, you might be able to bug the place.
I love this.
That's
I'm starting to sound like a spy.
yeah. We're bigging you up. You're going to have to tell us afterwards what you're doing.
I will, yeah, I will.
Is there a particular place where you get your equipment, or you go different places?
I go to a few different places, and I'm from Bristol, so there's a supplier that I use called SoundKit in Cardiff, and there's also a supplier called Pink Noise that are just north of Bristol as well. I tend to use them. There's going to be numerous people in London, but I tend to, I don't live in London, so I don't really know.
In London, the one I've used is Richmond Sound,
Oh yes, yeah.
that are in Richmond, which is a bit of a drag. There are various ones around in the centre of town, but that's the one I've used for a long time.
West End DJ are quite good, aren't they?
Don't know them.
Yeah.
Don't know them.
They're in Soho.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they have lots of stuff.
Do you have any practical advice then in cases where you're setting up and you've got an audio recorder with multiple channels and you can't monitor all of them? So you've got to take a guess at the beginning and see levels then, and then just leave it for the recording, or hope that you've got a high enough bit rate to give you enough headroom? Or
I don't do a lot of things like that. When I've got more than I can listen to all at once, I mean, it is getting more and more common that you're being asked to do things that you can't possibly monitor everything. That I will try and flip between them to check that things are happening as I think they should be, you know, and that you have got enough headroom and nothing's distorting. I mean, it depends on the situation, you know, whether you've got certain things that are more important than other things that might be a bonus. I'd also think about if it's a film, you know, if it's for picture, like what's the picture doing? You know, what are they more likely to use out of the channels that I'm recording? It would depend on the situation, really, and I'd monitor what I thought was more important. But I mean, ideally, you need to have enough sets of ears in your sound crew to be able to monitor everything, if everything is important.
you would be tempted to use auto gain on a channel or anything?
I'm sure I probably would.
Yeah.
Was Nick Broomfield in that clip using a rifle mic, or is it
Yeah.
holding the thing
It's a
like
short
that?
shotgun.
Well, it would be a short shotgun or a short rifle mic. I suppose there's slightly overlapping terms there, aren't there?
Yeah. Well, it's not the 816.
No, I bet it was a 416.
Yeah.
I mean, I would put a small amount of money on it.
Yeah.
But so is the sound really always going to be better by doing the big thing with a boom? You're just nearer to the sound source, or what? Why?
Well,
Obsession.
Larry, you talked a little bit about the difference, didn't you?
It's a microphone sounds better than a neck mic. It's,
Yeah.
you know, if you put them side by
I
side.
understand that, yeah.
And I think just because there's the flexibility, you put a neck mic on somebody, that's it.
Okay.
That's where your sound's going to come from.
Yeah.
And if you want to change it, you can't, unless you have another mic, of course. I
And also,
think
Nick Broomfield uses a boom, doesn't he, when he needs to? He's like a human.
a second mic, yeah.
Mm.
But I think having gone through, you know, I did do recording for a while. I do a lot of post, and just from what I see coming into the cutting room, there are often complaints about neck mics if they're not really done well. And there are fewer complaints about booms if they are reasonably good.
Yeah.
I think there's a greater tolerance, I'd say, with a
And I
boom.
suppose then there is a difference between documentary and drama in the ways
Yeah.
that things are made. But for example, the scene that you showed from Sisters-in-Law, with the lawyer walks towards the door,
Yeah.
and you hear him going, you know, away from Mike and a bit off Mike. I mean, I really like that.
Yeah, yeah.
If had he been on a radio mic, he'd have sounded the same wherever he was. And
Yeah.
that kind of idea that you're giving a audio cue as to where someone is in the room and how close they are to other people. I really like that. I think we've got very used to a lot of the reality TV, and the things that we hear now are all recorded on radio mics, on personal mics, and we've got very used to hearing everything very, very clear and close up, to the point where we think that's the way that everything should sound. And I disagree. I don't think it should be.
Mics aren't as heavy as they used to be. Booms aren't as heavy, so they're
Yes.
easier to move.
And you still have to be just as close. They haven't improved that. I
Yeah.
mean, they've got a little bit lighter, and I mean, we call it, you know, sound recorders sort of sit around and talk about talk about boom mics. They go, oh, how much suck has that one got? You know, and it's kind of how far away can you be and still hear
Yeah.
what the person's saying. That hasn't improved that much. It will depend on how noisy your environment is and how loud the thing is you're trying to record, how close you have to be. And obviously, if the thing is very quiet, if the person is very quiet, if it's a child, for example, or your environment's very noisy, you will have to get closer, and you're then in more danger of being in the shot or casting a shadow, perhaps. So, I mean, that problem hasn't gone away. Yeah, so maybe that was the clarification that you need. That problem is still there.
And remember, when you're watching a film, you're watching 1/10th, 1/40th, 1/80th of what's being shot. So there are lots of mic shadows that you don't see, and you assume that this is a very good recording and it's all gone very well, but you're not seeing all the rubbish that had to be cleared out of the way, and mic bumps and bad things that happen. So there are still problems. I mean, there's no simple solution that you can just put a mic up there and get everything. It's still, acoustics and placement and good ears.
I always wanted a microphone. I would call it a vampire microphone, one that doesn't have shadows or cause reflections in mirrors. There's a film, actually, one of Leo's other films, where you do actually see me and the cameraman in a mirror as we walk through, and it's supposed to be a drama, but your eye is taken somewhere else by the action, and you don't see it unless I point it out to you.
Just one comment on what you were saying about that sequence in Sisters-in-Law, which was a great film for talking about sound.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Where the lawyer is walking towards the door, and as you said, we're so used to tie mics, neck mics now, which creates sort of a flat sound. It's clear, but it's flat, and it doesn't have a lot of depth to it. And very often, the ease of using a neck mic creates more work in post, because if you want to be careful about it, you have to build in that acoustic. You have to build in somebody moving away. You have to do that in the fading and the sound editing to create that perspective, to give people a relationship in a room so they don't all sound like they're right there. Some are in the back, some are in the foreground, so you have to add atmospheres. And this is where post can help that kind of recording. So it can be a false economy to put tie mics on everybody, because if you want to get a good, quality, a good depth in the recording.
It's so good to have this kind of conversation between recording and post, because
Yeah.
quite often it's not a conversation you ever have. You record something and it goes somewhere, and someone either likes it or they're annoyed by it.
Yeah, they sit there saying, why did they do it like this?
Yeah.
But of course you never hear that.
No. I had a friend of mine rung me, fortunately, not about something that I'd recorded. And he's a brilliant sound editor, dubbing mixer. And he just rung me up and he said, why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult to give me clean dialogue? So I explained about roads and people you can't control and clothing rustle, and then you kind of went, oh yeah, all right, I get it. But I imagine you can sit in a dubbing theatre and hear all sorts of things that aren't supposed to be there. And think, why didn't they stop that chair creaking?
Or likewise, they say, what a great recording. I haven't had to do anything. We just let it play, like that Brendel one.
What was interesting for me is the idea that sometimes you can make the sound too perfect, like when you were talking about balancing a loud voice and a quiet voice. And with the child, the fact that the child's voice is so quiet adds a huge amount of tension to the piece. If you were able to hear the child clearly, you wouldn't get that sense of their vulnerability, the fact that other people have to speak for the child. And so if you were too clever and were able to balance it out perfectly, I think something really intrinsic would have been lost.
Yeah, it's part of the drama, isn't it? That you have to pay attention to her, like all the adults were in the room. I mean, there were there was the three people you see in the film, and there were me and Kim, and probably an interpreter as well, all in that room, all focused on that child. Who must have felt that pressure, but also that validation of being listened to.
That's an important point.
And that, I was talking to a couple of people about dramas earlier, and that is the reason why I prefer working on documentary, that kind of reality and the privilege of the stories you get to tell and the people that you get to meet and being part of something. There's another clip. There's so many things that I could have shown you, but there's another piece from Sisters-in-Law with another lady goes to court, and it's a Muslim court, and there's a sort of committee of men that she faces, and then immediately after that scene we go home with her, so she tells all her friends what happens, and her friends say to her, were you the only woman there? And she says, yes, I was the only woman there. And me and Kim were like, we were there. but it's that idea that she was completely oblivious of being filmed, of everything, because everything, it was her life. It was something very important that was happening to her that we were documenting, and it wasn't anything to do with us. It was just happening in front of us, and that's when working on a documentary is just amazing.
There's something that I didn't show you a clip of his, but Mike Grigsby, a very good documentary filmmaker, talks about And he said, everybody wants to hide the apparatus. And you hear this, I hear it with students who will say, I don't want to take a sound recordist with me because there are too many people in the room. And Mike said, you know, actually, when you get the trust of somebody, they like the fact that there are people there listening, as you say. There are people there who, and he said, they can see us working together well. They can see us communicating, and that gives them a sense of trust in the whole process, rather than trying to hide everything. And I think that openness can be very, very good in certain situations.
I think Sisters-in-Law is a brilliant example of that, actually, because when we were filming there were two cases involving domestic violence. One was the one that you saw, and another case involving a child who was beaten, and you saw the first appearance of that child. And I think that those people got something, those women and that child, possibly the child, but certainly the older women, they got something out of, there are people from England who have come to see this happening because it's important. Therefore, that validates me, and I will push for the rights that I know I should have. And you talk a lot about whether you change things when you film them. And I don't think we changed anything very much. But I think that is a valid point, that maybe those women got a little bit of extra courage from somebody coming from a long way away to be interested in what they were doing.
Could I just comment on what you were saying about the levels of voices and how that increased your engagement? One way to think about sound, comparing it to camera, to image, is that, you know, when you film you get light and shadow, and if you put too much light on, the scene gets very flat. There are no shadows, it's all bright. Everything's illuminated to the right level. And you can do that with sound, and I think that's what you're commenting on, that everything hasn't been raised to the same level, and there is that dynamic that's a very natural dynamic in the room, and that Mary preserved in the recording. And that you can sometimes find mixers who will work against that a little bit and say, raise the child, lower the, and it all becomes quite flat, no shadows.
Yeah, I mean, I worked originally in photography, and when I teach now, when I talk to students, and I say, don't be afraid to let things go into the shadow. It's okay, we don't have to see everything sometimes. That's the thing, that adds to it, the fact that you can't see everything. And I do think with the digital formats, there's a tendency to make everything perfect because we can. And I mean, for me, that moment when she's so quiet, that's, you know, it forces the audience to, I think it's really integral to that whole scene. That, you know, the fact that you have to almost lean into it.
That's how we were when we were recording it. It's very much the feeling of how we felt when she ran it. It's one of those things that it's difficult to show as a kind of teaching clip because it is so emotional when you're trying to listen to that child. The next time I'll show the longer scene, I think.
Something to try. Take a clip from a film, any film, feature, fiction, short, animation, documentary, and find a scene like that and play it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, so you can get past the content and you start becoming very aware of the sound, what's happening with the sound, what's happening if there's editing with camera work, and in a way the scenes come apart. You sort of enter the film and you can predict what's happening because you know all the dialogue by that time. But it's something I tell students to do, and one student took it to its extreme, and he said, I watched a scene 25 times, a 3-minute scene, and he said it's amazing what you start finding out, the relationship between camera movement and the characters in front of the camera, what's happening with sound, hearing atmospheres come in and go out, or a sound that's been added that suddenly becomes quite clear and it's added, and you begin to feel the filmmaking. So I recommend that.
You said something right at the beginning about being a big fan of mono.
Yeah.
You said you might talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big fan of mono. Again, it's sort of playing the devil's advocate. Teaching students who come to the film school with the express purpose of learning 5.1, but who cannot mix in mono. So they've just gone to the biggest thing. And I guess my feeling is that you're trying to get people to engage with that. And once you go to stereo, which is pretty good, but when you go to 5.1, it's out there. There are the speakers. That's where the sound is, and the picture's up here. And I think there's a disengagement. I was working with a mixer, a young mixer, and he had done a very beautiful job of a film in 5.1. And there's reverberation from music coming around you. You can feel atmospheres coming around you. And I said, press the button on the desk that will push that all into mono. And I don't want to pat myself on the back, but he said, that's amazing. He said, it's a better mix in mono than it is in 5.1. He said, everything I did worked better in mono. Because it rather than push a sound out there, you were entering the screen. It's an aesthetic, philosophical thing. It's not technical, except for the fact, and this isn't being facetious, but a good percentage of the cinemas you will watch a film in will have something wrong with the sound system. Either a speaker humming or not working properly. So you never know whether your film is being shown properly. Now, mind you, the way they work now, even mono takes a certain amount of digital processing. But I know, like, we do our graduation screenings at the BFI South Bank, and the sound tutors go in there and do a sound check and set it up for about a day. And they always find, in NFT 1, BFI South Bank 1, their pride and joy of a cinema, they'll find something wrong with a speaker every year. So you're not getting the full thing. And you sometimes get odd things with sound crisscrossing. So it's partly that if you're working on low budget films or small films that are going to be shown at festivals, it's hit and miss how well they're going to be shown a lot of the time. So there's that idea of keep your losses down. But aesthetically, I'm not quite sure what 5.1 is meant to do. And I say that as somebody who's worked with it and sat in with it. And it's gotten much more conservative. I mean, it used to be that sounds were just spinning around. It's pretty tame now on most films, except for action films. I saw the last James Bond film, and I'm watching the film, I'm getting engaged, and then there's a sound over there, and then something over there, and after a while you go, oh yeah, it's the surrounds. So I think mono is really quite beautiful, and it merges with the picture better. That's all I can say. That's a no.
It's good to know if you're starting out and you can't afford all that stuff or don't understand it. That's good to know. It's good work. It's good for computer games.
And I was just talking to this woman sitting in the center, and she was talking about having filmed a scene. And something, I didn't quite get the problem, but there was movement, and the movement on the soundtrack between the microphones didn't match the movement on the camera. Is that about right?
Yeah.
So there was somebody singing, and the sound is shifting, and you're getting a mismatch between what you're looking at and what you're seeing, what you're hearing. And I just suggested fold that down into mono, and you don't have this movement between the speakers. It will come from the person singing in the middle. So
Less to go wrong again, isn't
less
it? It's
to go wrong,
Keep
exactly.
it simple.
Yeah, and now we have Atmos, Dolby Atmos, which is 65 speakers. It'll never work. Who do we have?
Dialogue through the center speaker, or not. Like, I know it's traditional that it comes through the center speaker if you have a surround setup, and I work in computer games, and so it's an interactive environment. So you could be walking along, and it's important that you know that the person that you want that's talking is over there, so you can turn around and direct the action. But in cinema, what room is there for filling up these extra speakers, or not?
Exactly. I know there are lots of rules about that. Don't have voices coming from the back. until somebody does it and it works, and
Yeah.
then everybody has voices coming from the back. If it works, it works. That's about all you can say. I think it would probably work better in an interactive environment. I think it is traditional. Dialogue is always recorded in mono. It comes from the center speaker because that's where they want the voice to be. But try it. That's the thing to do. Just try it. I worked on a film where we had a voice, a narrator, and I wanted coming from the back at one point. Everybody said, no, you can't do that. And we tried it, and everybody, oh, it works. Yeah, let's do it.
Rules are there to be broken, aren't they?
Yeah.
Or bent.
I think just keep experimenting, and if you think it works, by all means.
I was just having a raging argument with a guy about it because he was like, I can't understand what's going on in this scene. We kind of agreed to disagree on the fact that I wanted to spatialize people a little bit more, and he wanted to have everything intelligible in it. But it wasn't.
I think you have to ask why you're doing it, and does it work? I mean, the thing about moving voices around is that if you have a face on the screen, you're looking at that face, you're watching the eyes. What is it, 60% of the time when we're viewing a face, we're looking at the eyes. And if you have that and you have sound of the voice coming from there and there or moving, it just, as you say, it takes you out of the film. You're not concentrating on that. You're listening to sound moving, and you don't want that. So if you've got somebody who's been paid $20 million to put their face up in a close-up, you don't want people to be going, oh, interesting soundtrack. Your attention is on them. Let's take somebody else. Jen.
Dear, this is probably a bit mixed up. I was just thinking about the position of the sound recordist and the position of the listener in a physical sense, but in an ideological sense as well. And that argument about one-point perspective, where there's a sort of ideal place that the individual is supposed to see the image from, but it positions you, and it's a sort of cultural and social and whatever ideological position. But what if you're doing sound? Is there a sort of ideal? Are you working with an ideal position for your eventual listener, or what if you want to kind of go against this ideological position for your listener, and you want, you want to kind of undercut the idea of, say, the documentary, for example, or the Hollywood film? And how do you get different voices and different ways of addressing? Or, sorry, this is completely mixed
Sounds
up,
like you
but
need
I'm
to talk
just
to
kind
Leo
of-
Regan.
What?
Sounds like you need to talk to Leo Regan, who made that film about the doctor who heard voices. I mean,
Oh, right. No, I wasn't so sure about that. Personally.
I think in
I
practice,
suppose I just mean, how do you undercut a kind of conventionalised, ideologically placed listener, basically? And I don't mean just use surround sound.
no.
Any ideas or thoughts?
I think I wouldn't do it during the shooting. I wouldn't try to do a recording that is set in stone that you couldn't bring back to a norm. So if I was on location, I would take the point of view you get the best recording you can. I have worked with people who have tried to do different things with recordings, and it just ties your hands when you're in editing. That you want the flexibility of a very good recording and as many wild tracks as you can get. And then I think what you're talking about is something that happens during the editing and the mixing. And how you place the sound, what you do with it, how you edit it, how you place it in surround, or what perspective you give it. Do you place it in an environment, or do you keep it clean.
Or different emphasis for different voices at
Yeah,
different
yeah.
times.
Different equalization, all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you sometimes, depending on what sort of work, but when ADR comes into the frame, do you sometimes know early on whether this scene you're recording is going to be ADR ultimately, and how seriously you want to take that scene? Obviously, there's loads of background noise, so you can't.
You're talking about fiction now, not documentary, or are you talking about documentary?
Yeah, even sometimes a documentary, does that happen where you actually?
Okay.
No one ever wants to ADR anything.
What is ADR stand for?
Automatic dialogue replacement is automatic, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, but it's when they replace the dialogue with, they reread it, redo it
In the studio.
in the studio.
Okay, yeah. But
It's-
so it's syncing with the lip
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah, it's done a lot in dramas in Hollywood. I imagine it's done, an awful lot. I mean,
The Pirates of the Caribbean, they don't record any sound on set at all. It's all ADR.
right.
Whole film.
Do they not record any guide audio?
No.
Yeah, no, they would.
They must do.
They
surely.
must be
Yeah.
something.
No, they do a guide.
Yeah, yeah.
80%, somebody told me, an editor I know said 80% of what comes out of Hollywood is fake, completely redone. But they do it very well.
Documentaries, you wouldn't do it unless there was a huge problem. I mean,
Yeah.
the only place in documentaries where something similar to that happens is in natural history, where the soundtrack's virtually made up afterwards, and someone will act being polar bear crunching through snow, and you put that on, and that's Foley rather than ADR. No, I mean you'd only do that if you absolutely had shot something that was unusable and you wanted to save it.
It'd be really cringeworthy getting the real person into a studio and saying,
It's
That would be
nuts.
awful.
Yeah.
I mean, if that ever happened on anything I worked on, I'd be mortified. They get around it, in a lot of documentaries nowadays, there's a voiceover, they'd put a line in, saying,
Or a saxophone.
or a saxophone, yeah, that's the saxophone to tell you, the line to tell you what's happening, the saxophone to tell you how to feel about it. Yeah.
I think it is interesting. I alluded to it when I was talking that a lot of feature film post-production techniques are coming into documentary. And now you have to start deciding when is a documentary. What do you mean by documentary? If you're doing ADR, if you are really replacing the voice of somebody in a scene, which I don't know, there might be a reason for doing it. If you're adding Foley, if you're completely recreating the soundtrack, if you're using CGI, computer-generated imaging. So, I don't know, it's up to the filmmaker, I guess, to what are you trying to do? But as somebody said to me, anything that I can use to put my idea across is valid.
Yeah, I mean, that Doctor Who is voices, whether you think that it works or not, and there's a big debate about that. It was an interesting intellectual exercise to talk about how it all fitted together, and that uses quite a bit of music interspersed. And that wasn't something that most of the things I work on wouldn't have any music at all. And that was one of the things that kind of makes you think it might be a drama, is that it's got that music that tells you how to feel about a particular scene or something that's going on.
This might be a stupid question. When you were talking about, like the lawyer in Sisters, who's on a radio mic and is walking kind of into the background and isn't getting any quieter, if you wanted to fix that in post, would you use fader automation or would you use like a clip fade?
I'd use a fader.
You'd automate the fader?
I don't know if I'd automate it, but I'd use a fader if I could.
Right, so you wouldn't do it on the clip?
No. I think you have to feel that, and you have to do it with the picture.
And what about the change in the reflections ratio?
You have to work that in too, by adding some reverberation.
And lastly, if you use fader automation, but then you want to bump up the whole mix, how do you take the automation level up with it?
I'm not a mixer, so I don't know
Oh,
that
okay.
much about how boards work, but it just all goes up together.
Right.
Yeah, it will be programmed into it, I would have thought. But yes, you would have to do that. You would have to recreate reality by moving him back in terms of volume, but increasing reverberation. Maybe adding a bit more atmos to just give it a bit more texture. Yeah.
You know, when I said microphone placement was a dark art, that's another one I think that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Hello.
Last one.
It's just about jobs, really.
Oh.
But not like
I had one of those
not
once.
how do I get a job. More like, I mean, Mary, you've kind of, you've picked your niche and gone sound recordist through and through, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
And Larry, you seem to have done quite a lot of different roles.
I get bored easily.
Yeah, I just wondered how you'd each worked out where your talents and passions lay.
Mine was a bit of an accident, really. I was quite interested in sound, but when I went to university, I did a lot of camera work actually at university, and quite a bit of editing as well. But then one day I swapped with the sound recorders just so that someone else could have a go at the camera. So I did sound and I loved it. I just, actually I've said it quite a few times and people laugh, but kind of no one bothers you that much really. You just kind of get on with it. You get to decide what's getting recorded. No one's worried about it till the edit, so you get to make those decisions. And it's quite good. If you're on camera, someone's hassling you all the time to get this shot and that shot and do that.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, I like an easy life really. So it's kind of that, but it just is. It's a lovely job to do, and doing it in documentaries where you get to meet all these fabulous people is the other side of it that's also brilliant. And then you get to see your stuff on the screen. That's nice. You never quite get over seeing something on screen big, particularly if it's big at a cinema that you recorded. It's a lovely thing to do.
Slightly similar. When I was at university doing film, I learned how to use the recorder first. So everybody came to me to record their films. So I did a lot of recording, and I love doing it. And I like being on set, but I also like being in the editing room. And because of the kinds of films I worked on, I was allowed to do the editing and the sound. I thought of them sort of together. And that carried on. I miss doing recording now. I still record as part of sound post. I'll go and do my own recordings of effects and things. But I don't do it on location. And I just found at one point, if I was the recordist and I was the editor and the sound editor, I get hired for a long time. And I'm on the film for a long time. But yeah, it's, I think I just didn't like being on location. I didn't like traveling as much anymore. And I was terrible with neck mics, so I gave that up.
That dark art.
That dark art I didn't get.
I think it is quite important to have some sort of knowledge of both, isn't it? Even if it's, I don't have a big knowledge of post, but I have edited things and I have edited my own sound recordings. So kind of knowing that what is essential, so when you walk away from the set or from your scene, you know that that's there, so that someone like Larry isn't going to be ringing you up and go, where's the whatever, for this scene, didn't you realise the fridge went off halfway through and I'm going to need that Atmos track, to try and at least like write an apology on the sound sheet if you couldn't get it. Really sorry, I know this is a problem, but we had to leave and I couldn't get it. So I think if you're planning a career in sound, or if you're planning a career as a director, it's worth having. They say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, but it's worth having some knowledge of the other roles.
But one point I'd like to get in here, because we've both been talking about it sort of in the background, and it's the idea of collaboration. And I think very often, especially in sound post, people get isolated. And you're on location, you're working with crews all the time, so you still have that sense of give and take and working with other people and their ideas. But it's very easy, as you go down through sound, you get more and more isolated. You are the sound designer. You don't talk to this person, you don't talk to that person. I think all of you, no matter what job you're doing, you should try to build that in. Because sound, editing, music, camera, they're all really tied together. And the more you know each other, the better the projects will be that you work on. I sound like Ken Loach.
I think that's a very good place to stop. And that was actually lovely, in fact.
I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.